Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Refined Savage podcast. I am back from vacation. I am rejuvenated. I am ready to go. We have some incredible podcasts lined up for you in the next couple months. Let's start off with a little business right off the bat. Viking Coffee, Evan Armstrong's brand, the best coffee in the world. He's out there in the Bowling Green area. He is brewing coffee, and it's the best stuff out there. I can't say enough about this. You guys have heard me talk about Viking Coffee before. I'm just a huge fan. I've never had one of his coffees that I didn't like. Obviously, my favorite is the Old Man Strength Brew. That's the brew from our show here. I want you guys to give him a try. If you are buying store-bought coffee, it's garbage. Evan's going to hook you up. Check them out at vikingcoffeeco.com. Use the code VikingCoffee10 at checkout for 10% off. Cerberus Strength. If you go to a strongman competition, like if you're going to the Arnold here coming up the end of the month or beginning of next month, I guess, whenever it is, March, you're going to see Cerberus Strength gear everywhere. Athletes, sponsored athletes, and athletes who aren't sponsored just love the gear, wearing their stuff. I was checking out their belts the other day. They've got these killer belts that I think would be great, especially for Highland Games athletes, because they're nice and strong and supportive, but you can move in them, which is important. You guys got to be able to move. You don't want to be locked into place. Check out Cerberus Strength. They also have throwing sandbags. They have lifting sandbags. They've got tacky, smelling salts, everything you could possibly need. Check them out at cerberus-strength.us. Use the code REFINEDSAVAGE10 at checkout for 10% off. My favorite people in the world are at Warrior CBD. Nancy at Warrior CBD always is taking care of me, and she is great. If you have questions about CBD oil, it is so easy. Don't even ask me. Get on the Warrior CBD Instagram page, shoot Nancy a message. She will give you all the dope on what, so to speak, on what is good for you and what isn't, what you should be taking and what isn't, and if it's if you have questions about your job, if you're one of these people who work in one of these archaic buildings that drug test you and won't let you take CBD oil because they're weird, get a hold of her. She'll be able to tell you if it's going to pass a drug test or not. Go over to warriorcbdofficial.com. After that, use the code WARRIOR20OFF at checkout for 20% off. Serious Steel. If you are outfitting any kind of gym, whether it's your own home gym or your CrossFit gym or a high school weight room, whatever it is, Serious Steel has everything you could possibly need, and they have a lot lower prices than everywhere around. If I need a piece of equipment or a piece of, so anything for the gym, I go right to Serious Steel first. They always have it, and it's always cheaper than everywhere else. Head on over to SeriousSteel.com. Use the code SAVAGE at checkout for 10% off. Stay Classy Meats. Stay Classy Meats is the best, man. Being on this carnivore diet, it's just such a no-brainer. You want to eat meat. You'd love to be able to hunt your own meat. I don't have that kind of time. I don't have the skills to hunt my own meat. Stay Classy Meats is the next best thing. Humanely raised, humanely processed animals, no antibiotics, grass-fed, drinking out of Montana streams. They live a good life, and then they're brought to you in boxes right to your front door. These animals lived a good life. This isn't factory farming, and it's great quality meat. I can't tell you how good it tastes. It's just, I'm usually not a fan of grass-fed beef, but theirs is phenomenal. Their bison is out of this world. I can't say enough about the bison. Bacon, it's just the best. Check them out at StayClassyMeats.com. Use the code SAVAGE at checkout for 10% off. Impact Mouth Guards. If you guys are in any kind of contact sport, or if you have a kid in a contact sport, make sure you're using high quality mouth guards. For $30-$40, you can get a mouth guard that may actually not only save your choppers, but it may save you from some traumatic brain injuries. Impact Mouth Guards, they are just obsessive about mouth guards. They fit each mouth guard to your standards and what you need, and then they customize them too. They're awesome looking, and they worked great. If you're one of these teeth grinders, or if you're a lifter who wants to put a few more pounds on their lift, check out Impact Mouth Guards. Head on over to impactmouthguards.com. Use the code REFINESAVAGE. That's capital R, capital S, Refine Savage for 15% off. And finally today, the beard struggle. Do you have one of those big, giant mountain man beards? You know, the big, manly, bushy, giant beards? You want to take care of that thing. You can't look all scraggly. You can't smell. You can't have macaroni and cheese sitting in there. You got to take care of that thing or no one's going to want to make out with you. Head on over to thebeardstruggle.com. Use the code REFINESAVAGE at checkout for 15% off. Beard balms, beard oils, beard straighteners, beard combs. Everything you could possibly want for that giant mountain man beard is waiting for you. Now, today on the show, Dustin Myers. Second time on the podcast. Dustin is a strength and conditioning coach in Ohio here. He owns Old School Gym, which next to my gym is my favorite gym on the planet. Great guy, lots of insight. It was a really good conversation, great podcast. I think you're really, really going to enjoy it. So check it out. Share this with a friend, and we'll see you at the end. All right, we are back at Old School Gym. What the hell is the name of this town?
Well, it's funny you asked that. So the name is Pataskala.
Pataskala.
But I was actually having this conversation with my wife last night. We're like, no one's ever heard of Pataskala before. There's not another one anywhere that we know of.
Right.
So it's like, are we even pronouncing it right?
Right.
You go to towns, and usually the people in the town pronounce the name all fucked up. You go to, Lancaster here in Ohio, and they pronounce it Lancaster.
Right.
So like you go to Newark out there, and they pronounce it like Newark instead of Newark. So we're like, is it supposed to be Pataskala? I don't know. We say Pataskala though.
We think that we're pronouncing it correctly.
Correct.
We that that's actually happening.
Right.
So last time we were down here, we were talking about you were getting ready to go on vacation to California, right? Is that where you ended up?
I really can't remember, but that sounds right. I don't know.
And you ended up at Muscle Beach.
Yeah, so we've been out to Muscle Beach a couple times. Yeah, we had a good time with it. So for any of you that are really unfamiliar with what Muscle Beach is, it's literally an outdoor gym on the beach in Venice, California. And the original one was a little bit further north, right in Santa Monica. And it was just a bunch of, pull-up bars and stuff like that on the beach. And then I think in the 70s, they moved it down to Venice, right in the golden era of bodybuilding, and put this, it was kind of an extension of Gold's Gym, I think, but they had, some squat racks and benches and stuff out there. And it's been there ever since. The equipment looks like it's still the same equipment from the 1970s, right. Just rusted to hell, and the pads are disgusting and falling apart, and it is absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
Have you been out there before?
No, I've never. I've been to California, never out to Muscle Beach, but I saw you doing all the stuff on the rings and shit, which is super cool. That's just an iconic image. To be on the rings at Muscle Beach.
A lot of those old pictures of Arnold and Franco and stuff, training outdoors, that's where it was, And I actually trained there in my early 20s one time. I went out to visit some friends from college. I think it might have been like a year or two after we graduated. And we stayed in Venice. We went out that night, and probably didn't go to bed till about 4 a.m. And I think I had to catch a flight the next day around noon. But I was like, "There's no way I'm not going to Muscle Beach."
Right. Yeah.
So I woke up early. Probably slept like 2 hours. And at that time, there's no like cell phones with maps or anything.
Sure.
And I walked out of their apartment. Was like, "All right, which way is Muscle Beach?" And someone said, "Yeah, it's 5 blocks that way." So I'm in my flip flops and I jog down the beach. And I get there, and I'm like, I couldn't believe it. I was just in disbelief. At that point, I'd probably seen it maybe in like a Muscle and Fitness magazine or something, or in Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And there I was at this, outdoor gym that I'd seen so many times. And so I was like, I want to buy a day pass. So I asked the guy for a day pass. He goes, well...
Oh, so they're like selling memberships there and shit?
Oh, yeah. There's guys that have memberships to
shit.
it. Yeah, absolutely.
So it was kind of just, you just walk in there. It looks like there's no...
No, so like it's actually like a real, somewhat fully functional gym. You can have a membership. There's regulars that come there.
Yeah.
But I would imagine their biggest thing is, day passes, tourists that come in or whatever. And but so I got there, and I just figured, like you thought, that I could just walk in or whatever, and they stopped me, and I'm like, well, let me buy a day pass. And they said, well, you got to have shoes on. You got flip-flops. You can't lift here. I was
You're on the beach.
Oh yeah, I was just crushed. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I literally begged the guy. I was like, look, I'm from Ohio. It's been my dream to lift here. Like, I own a personal training studio in Columbus with my buddy. I'm a trainer. Like, please. And finally, he was like, all right, man, whatever. I think I gave him an extra 20 spot on top of the day pass. And he let me lift, and I can remember being in there, hitting some incline bench and stuff. And there, sure enough, there was tourists on the boardwalk walking by, like taking pictures of us, and it just felt really surreal.
Yeah.
And there was this older guy in there. He looked like a beach bum. His skin was like leather, and he had long blonde hair, and he had a little bit of a build to him, but was kind of shriveled up. He was probably late 50s, early 60s. And so I think I had a digital camera, one of those old Canon digital cameras that were from like the early 2000s. And I went over to him and said, "Hey, man, you think I could maybe get a picture with you?" Because he just looked like a guy that belonged at Muscle Beach, Right. And he stood there for a second. I thought he was going to tell me like to get lost. And he just looked around. And he goes, "What pose? Double bicep?" And I said, "Hell yes, double bicep. Let's do it." So before you leave, remind me. I got that picture on the wall down there to show you. So that was my original experience at Muscle Beach.
Yeah.
And so then it was really cool, I guess how many years later, it would be 15 or 20 years later, to go back with my partner Corey here at the gym, and then a bunch of our friends and training partners from Old School Gym.
Yeah.
So it was cool.
Did you have your family out there too, or?
So my wife went out with me. Yeah.
I saw you doing like workouts on the beach and stuff.
Yeah. We do that anytime we go on a vacation anywhere. So I mean, who knows? And sometimes that stuff gets kind of recycled on Instagram. Right. So it could have been from any of a number of trips.
We do that. I call it the muster. So whenever we're on vacation or something, I'll tell my son. I said, "Hey, 6 a.m. muster."
Whatever you can muster up, right?
He comes down at 6 a.m. We get out on the beach, or last time we were in Iowa for Christmas, and I told him, "Hey, we're hitting the road for home at 8 a.m. 6 a.m. muster." Came to the dining room and we're hitting push-ups in the living room, and get it in. So.
Oh, I love it. That's the thing is on vacation. I never go into vacation with like, all right, here's my workout plan for the week or whatever. Right. Just like whatever you can do, but get it done in the morning. Yep. You feel great for the day, And so then you're getting workouts with your son on vacation. How old is he?
14.
14, okay. Yeah. Oh, that's like an awesome age, right?
Perfect.
Yeah, so
it was, I always tell people, if you've got a kid like 5th, 6th, 7th grade, he was like really kind of wishy-washy about wanting to work out. I don't know if he was dad, wants to work out. I was trying not to be too overbearing, and I got him Jocko's book, That Way of the Warrior Kid, and he read it, and it was like a switch flipped on him. All of a sudden, he wanted to train, and it just, 3 years later, he's still working hard.
Well, it's that phenomenon too of he's been around it his whole life. He's watched you do it. He's heard you talk about it. But now that book is someone else telling him to do it. Right. It's the same idea as you would have implanted in his head.
Yeah.
So I think just coming from a different place. So this is something that's changed since the last time we talked. My son actually started wrestling.
Nice.
Yeah, so he turns 8 next month, so he's still young. And I wasn't gonna, push him into it. Everyone kept saying, "When's your kid gonna wrestle?" I'm like, "He's 5, like whenever." And I think youth, the way I shouldn't even say most, many parents of youth wrestlers, especially, but youth athletes in general, they just ruin the sports for their kids. 100%. And so my big thing has always just been like, hey, we work out all the time. There's a culture in our house when we work out. My son always comes here, my daughter too. We do rope climbs, we do sleds. But hey, when they want to be done, we're done. I don't push them. I'll ask them in the summertime, like, hey, you want to go on the bars and do some stuff? If they say yes, cool. If they say no, no big deal. So I just kind of thought, maybe eventually he'll want to wrestle.
Right.
I've never really brought it up to him, but he's been around it forever. But then this year he said he wanted to do it. And I was like, oh, like, what if he has a bad experience? What if he hates it? What if he goes out this first year and gets beat up and never wants to do it again? You just don't know, So I was like, well, we'll try it. We'll just take it slow. We're not going to wrestle off or anything. We're just going to, we'll go to some of the matches and maybe get some, extra matches against some of the other kids and whatever. Not go to tournaments every weekend and spend our whole winter time, in gyms at wrestling tournaments or whatever. And but anyway, we're a month in, and he is like absolutely obsessed.
Awesome. It's not just wrestling parents for sure. I mean, I've seen it as my son's grown up with football and wrestling and just everything. You get these guys who probably are a lot better in their memory than they were in real life, and they really want to put that on their sons.
Back in '82, they could have won that state title,
With cousin Rico. So like my kid got into the track and field world. He's throwing the shot and discus, which is my thing. But I have my friend Zach working with him because I don't want to be
right
and coach. But when he got into wrestling, it bummed me out because he was a bigger kid, but when he went in, they put him in wrestling. If day one they put him in with kids that were like 2 and 3 years older than him that had been in the sport forever, and they just beat the shit out.
Well, and 2 or 3 years of mat experience when you've never done it is like a lifetime.
And dads on the side of the mat yelling for the kids to do certain moves. And he got slammed a couple times, ended up throwing up because the kid landed on his belly, and the next year he was like, I just don't want to go back. I said, no problem. He's a hell of a football player, great football player, great track and field, but I keep trying to get him to go to jiu-jitsu with me. He's just not into it. Just had a bad experience.
Well, I was going to say, and it might stem from that bad experience right there. And obviously there's nothing you could have done to prevent that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, maybe the coaches sort of looked at, hey, this kid might be a big kid, but let's bring him along slowly. Yeah. But instead, you put him with these other kids that might be the same size, but when you have 2 and 3 years experience on them, like it's just not fair.
Yeah.
And you get slammed one time and you're not going to like it, So that's been my biggest fear, and so far it hasn't happened. But I did have one kind of dad experience. I'm going in, and of course, the coaches have kind of talked me into helping a little bit and stuff. So I'm like, I'll bring my shoes. I'll start helping you guys. I tried to sit on the sidelines for the first week or two, but that didn't last very long. Well, and so this is maybe now like the second or third practice that I'm actually helping out at. And so I tried to kind of hover over him a little bit and help him a little bit more. And that day when he's doing really good, but then we leave that day, we get in the car and he starts crying. And I was like, dude, what's wrong? You did awesome today. He said, I don't want you to be my coach. I'm like, all right, I'll just be hands off now, So luckily, a good buddy of mine, Chris Farrington, who I used to train with when I was a boxer, but he's worked out here at the gym forever. But he's the middle school coach, and his son wrestles as well, and he helps out. So I kind of let Chris work with him now. Chris kind of keeps him, and my son and his son over there kind of works with them, and I try to stay hands off and just kind of go around and help some of the other kids or whatever, and just be dad.
Yeah. And if you got someone who you trust like that, like I do with Zach, working with his technique, it's just like it's the best of both worlds. Oh
yeah, well, and it works out better because honestly, Chris is a better technique coach than I am anyway. I'm not.
Zach, same way with throws. Yeah.
Right. So it's working out good, but I'm sure it'll get more and more interesting as it goes on.
I try to tell him. I said, look, and I don't. He's super hard on himself when he throws, and it's funny because I'm so into his track and field. But I tell him, I don't care how far you throw. I love watching you throw. That's it. I don't care if you don't ever make state championship. I just love watching you throw.
Right.
It's so cool to watch.
You see a part of yourself right there.
You do, and I see the way better part of myself because he's technically so much sharper, especially at that age. And then when it comes to football, and I'm not a football guy, I'm not a sports guy, and not
right.
Which is weird for some people. Like I don't follow the Browns football or Ohio State football or anything. But
dude, you're not doing the fantasy draft tonight?
No,
what's wrong with you?
Nothing going on with that. But he plays football, and it's all jokes. We're always, like he made a penalty or something during the game, and me and my wife are both joking in the stands. That's not our kid. I don't know that kid. We tell him all the time, but he's really good at football. But there's just no emphasis on that at all. And with the throwing, I'm just trying to, I just love watching you throw, dude. Have fun with it and see where it goes,
Right.
I do push him towards the Naval Academy a lot, though, Naval Academy, do well there.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. I mean, if my kid continues to wrestle and he likes it, and he's still enjoying it, then that's great. But if he wants to quit next week or when he's in 7th grade or whenever, I really don't care. Honestly, what's important to me, though, is I hope he always wants to work out, in some form or another. So I think, and for my daughter, too, as long as they always like to work out and like to work out with dad, I'll be happy. So whether or not he, never wrestles again after this year, I mean, I can live with that. But I'm hoping that they always have that love for training.
Well, didn't you say, I think the last time we talked, that your old man was kind of a big influence on as far as weightlifting? Yeah,
so I grew up, watching him, lift, and he even, in the early 80s, he had weights in the garage, and he coached football at the local high school, and the guys at that time, high schools didn't have strength coaches, so in the summer, they would come down and lift weights with him. So I was, 4 and 5 years old watching high school kids. He was essentially training them. Only we didn't really call it that then. He was just working out with them. So then like I just kind of grew up in a culture of weightlifting. He came home from the steel mill, he lifted weights out in the garage. It was cold out there. It didn't matter whether it was 0 degrees out. That's just what he did. It was just so that was those were like the three things. Growing up, I remember thinking, okay, when you're a man, you chop firewood, you lift weights, and you cook. Because that's what he always did when he came home every day. And those are three things that I really enjoy doing. But so my dad was a huge influence on me on that. And I don't ever think he really, obviously, it didn't have anything to do with his income or his livelihood. So I don't think he looked at it the same way I look at it now. I don't think he realized it was going to have such an impact on me. But it's just kind of the way it all shook out.
Weird how we picked that shit up,
Right.
I always talk about my old man. My old man was not, matter of fact, he was recruited by Penn State to wrestle back in the 60s probably, and he didn't end up doing that. But when I knew my old man, he was kind of a heavy old Italian guy, kind of Tony Soprano type.
Right.
When I looked at him, now he didn't become my hero till later when you realize the guy went 40 years and never missed a mortgage payment, and that kind of stuff. But
you can't appreciate those things at that age. You have nothing to compare it to, no basis for it.
Right. But my Uncle Butch, and I've talked about him a million times on the show, my Uncle Butch was this bald, tan, jacked bodybuilder. He was born in the 40s where, if you were a bodybuilder, you looked at some kind of queer, those guys are all queer.
Right. It was the culture wasn't mainstream at all at that point.
He was one of these old-time physical culture guys, and I can remember him sitting at barbecues and when he got a sturdy chair, he'd do dips in his chair and stuff. So he was just constantly getting after it. And, that was my hero growing up. I wanted to be just like Uncle Butch, and it's amazing how...
You probably didn't even realize at that time, though, Uncle Butch was probably influenced by your dad.
Yeah,
your dad was just already past that point or whatever,
Yeah. It really puts into your head that we have this effect on these kids and we don't even know it. Something little we say to them, that will stay in their brains until they're in their 40s, and it either tweaks them for the good or the bad. It's a huge responsibility we may not even realize we have.
Yeah, it's heavy when you think about it because everything you say and everything you do matters in front of them. So you gotta, it's so hard to say like, all right, I'm gonna make sure everything I say is appropriate and I handle every situation appropriately. But I think as long as you just have kind of this blanket guideline of I'm going to do everything in their best interest. I'm always going to show them that I care for them and I love them. Then hopefully at the end of the day, you don't mess them up at some point, right?
It's funny because I will, when I go to a gas station and I buy a cup of coffee and the lady gives me my change back, I say thank you, ma'am, and I walk out the door. And I was never one of those guys. I'm not a military guy, so I never made my son call people sir or ma'am, but he just does it, and it's just something he picked up from me. Which is great, but then I'm thinking, how many other weird habits does he pick up from me that aren't as great? But yeah, it's just such a huge responsibility that we don't even realize we have.
I can remember one time, I might have been like in my early 20s, and I remember my girlfriend, who is my wife now, she made a comment one time about the way I drink my coffee when I have a mug, and it was like kind of like I shrugged my shoulders up and drink it, and she kind of like made a crack on me one time. So I didn't think nothing of it. I was like, I don't know, that's just how you drink coffee. Well, then, one time maybe I must have been home from college or something, and went out to the garage to get a workout in with my dad. It's cold out there, and his pre-workout is coffee.
Yep.
So we're both drinking our coffee, and I kind of turn towards him and I look, and he's doing it the exact same way. I'm like, well, I guess that's where I learned it from, without even knowing. That's just the way you drink your coffee. So we have such an effect on them, and not to change the subject, but I want to talk about this before I lose my train of thought. But going back to not just the mental effect we can have on our kids, but talking about fitness and training and the effect you can have on young athletes that way, or your kids. We've always worked out, like I said. My son and my daughter, from an early age, that's just what we do for fun on the weekends. We do push-ups. I built chin-up bars and dip bars in our yard, and they push sleds, and we do rope climbing. It's just fun. It's just part of it. And now keep in mind, my son is not an aggressive kid. Mm-hmm. His cousins are like little hellions, little like roughnecks, when they get together and they tussle or whatever, like, man, like little James is rough,
Yeah.
And so that's why I was kind of wondering, like, is Jack going to take to wrestling? Because he's a nice kid. He's not an aggressive kid. But now when I watch him wrestling, not only does he understands how to push himself without me having to try to push him, just because he's felt physical discomfort pulling sleds, pushing sleds. And trust me, with my 7-year-old, I'm not making him push sleds so he pukes. It's nothing like that. But the other thing is, he has such, especially for being a new wrestler, such better body control than other kids his age that are new to it. Yeah. Usually until, a kid has been on the mat for a year or two, do they really start to understand how to use their hips and have core strength and not just look like a wet noodle out there. And I'm not trying to say he's like a phenom or nothing, but the strength training that we have done, even very informally, has carried over to where he understands how to use his body much better than normal kids his age. So if there's one thing I can say to everyone out there that's listening, don't be afraid to start strength training with your kids at a young age. Have them, make it fun for them. You don't want to make it feel like a quote-unquote workout or like a chore, but, have them do lunges and planks and pull-ups and rope climbs. And
see, but that's okay. So you talking about that is different than what most people think of when you say have your child do some strength training. Because so I gave a speech at Ashland a couple weeks ago, and Judd Logan at Ashland is kind of my mentor. He's my hero growing up, as far as I wanted to be just like him as far as strength and conditioning. And I gave the speech on using strongman implements in training, and he stopped me, and when we did the Q&A, and he said, look, as a college coach, he goes, this is what I wish all kids were doing when they're training. Forget about the snatches and forget about the 600-pound deadlifts. Lift on objects, do calisthenics and pull-ups and dips. And he goes, I'll get the rest of that stuff later.
Right.
This is what they should be doing. And what you just said about having sled drags and pull-up bars and dip bars and push-ups, all that stuff is great. And it's not like you're not saying, yeah, you should have your 7-year-old squat 300 pounds,
Right.
Can they do an air squat properly, which literally 75% of the kids that walk into my gym can't do an air squat properly or jump rope.
Well, most kids, even by the time they get to the high school level, they may tell you that they can squat 315, but they can't even brace properly. They can't even sit back into the squat, So I totally agree with you. I mean, I have, on top of the sled stuff, my kids do, sometimes they don't even know they're doing, but we do farmers walks. I have them carry stuff. They carry things overhead, and then, now, my son and a couple of his little buddies from his team, I bring them in once a week, put them through a little workout in here. And so we're starting to implement more, quote unquote, traditional strength training stuff, but still even, when they're doing split squats, I have them holding a medicine ball or a kettlebell in that front rack position, teach them proper positioning. You don't need to put a bar on a 7-year-old's back or even a 10-year-old's back.
You're building the base of that pyramid, and making it as big as possible so that peak can get higher.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I always tell the story about when my son was just able to walk, still in diapers. I would put a 8-pound medicine ball on the couch, and I'd just knock it off, and he'd walk over and pick it up like with perfect Atlas stone technique, because that's how kids do it.
Right.
They pick it up and you put it on the couch.
We lose that movement as we get older, right?
Yeah, and he would just do that, and every time I would knock it off, whenever he was ready, he would come over and pick it up again. And it's just building that base. It's matter of fact, one of the things that's happened since the last time I talked to you is our base of kids has gotten a lot bigger. We've got a lot more kids in the gym, and you start them off as basically being phys ed teachers. We're just teaching them how to jump rope, how to do a proper air squat, how to do push-ups down, real push-ups.
Right. Yeah, find a room full of grade school kids that can do push-ups properly. You probably cannot find that.
It's super tough. Do they even do like the? Remember you said like the presidential fitness?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know if they do that anymore or not.
I can't imagine in this day and age that
no.
would be something they would. Someone's going to get their feelings hurt or something. I was just talking to Kurt Roberts about this, who's a 70-foot plus shot putter, and now he's a phys ed teacher who's like, I want to revamp the whole American physical education system and get us back to those roots. It would be a huge help.
So let me ask you this: so your son's 14. Mm-hmm. Now, does he come into the gym and train with you?
Yeah.
Or does he normally train on his own when he comes in? Does he have like a group of friends he brings in, or?
It's not that he's brought in friends. He's had friends go, oh, Hayden can do all this stuff that I can't, so I'm going to come to the gym. So it's like 3 or 4 of his buddies that are now filtering into the gym. Some of these kids are already with, sports specific training centers in the area, and they're not, they're not. Well, you know how that is. They're running through rope ladders. They're any better though, and it's a tough. I never badmouth those places to their parents because it's hard to. They're not listening to podcasts like this or reading books. They don't know the story behind why that stuff probably isn't the best thing for your kid at this point. But.
I mean, here's my stance on it. I think anything that gets kids excited to work hard and train is a good thing.
Yes, right.
But just because something's good does not mean it's ideal.
Yeah.
And, I have this conversation with parents a lot. They'll say, well, what about speed ladders or what about this or what about that? I say, well, okay, why do you want to do the speed ladders? Well, I want my kid to get faster. Well, if you want to get faster, we should run sprints and we should get stronger and we should push heavy sleds.
Common sense.
I mean, it's common sense to me, but it's almost like it's advanced thinking because common sense has turned into they associate, well, we should do speed ladders. And I'll say, okay, well, if you want your son to compete in speed ladders, then we should definitely do speed ladders because they don't understand the fact that, when they're doing these speed ladder drills, they're not giving maximal effort. There's not a maximum speed involved. So that therefore, there's not really going to be any change.
Yeah.
So you're going to get a little bit better at the ladder, but I don't think there's going to be that carryover. So, but no, trust me, I just had this conversation with a youth wrestling parent a couple weeks ago because he was taking, he already does some of my stuff. There's a buddy of mine from back home, he takes his son, and they do some of my stuff, but then they're also going to like a speed trainer.
Yeah.
And I watched the video of some of the stuff they do, and like I said, it's not that it's bad.
No.
And I just said, how much running has he done over the past year? He said, well, we don't really do any running. I'm like, well, what about sprints? What about hill sprints? Well, we never do those. Okay. Well, I watched him jog around the mat, and he runs flat-footed. He doesn't know how to run on his heels, doesn't know how to kick and use his hamstrings when he runs. So doing speed ladders is not going to help that.
You'd think a speed and agility facility that's meant to do that was the first thing they would fix, right?
Right.
Watch them run down the turf and.
I don't want to say to their credit. That's probably the wrong way of saying it, but I think to play devil's advocate, they probably do not know any better. You have someone there working that is not an expert, but they've been shown, hey, do these speed ladders. We watched the Instagram video of some NFL player doing one, and okay, they caught X amount of passes last year, so then we should do that,
Well, I have coaches working for me who, are definitely not experts. And I'm sure.
But then they should seek out experts or listen to experts.
You just do Valenti 101. That's all I want you coaching. Mm-hmm. So if as long as you've been in the system, you've got good technique, you know how to teach, you're good at work in a room, and you just teach my system, I know that we're doing okay. If someone is one of these speed, quote unquote, speed gurus, and they just have a bunch of disciples running his program. I don't know why I'm running through the rope ladder. I'm just putting them through the rope ladder,
Well, I think you've hit on something here, and this is with not just in the strength world, but just in coaching in general. People do things or implement things into their programs without having any idea why they're doing it. Yeah. I see it with coaches. They're doing something, and I want to say, okay, you're probably warming them up this way because that's what you did in high school, or you're doing this drill because your coach taught you that 25 years ago. But they've never stopped to question, why are we doing this? What's the purpose? And I get it. Sometimes there is just a need for hey, we got to make these guys exhausted, or we need to just, bury them today or whatever. And I get that. And there's a time and place for that. But you should be training with purpose too. And if you've never stopped to ask, why am I doing this? What's the carryover? What's the benefit? Then you're doing yourself or your athletes a real disservice at that point.
Yeah, and it always goes back to that it's hard to, and I feel like we're talking shit. But
hey, let's talk shit. That's what this is for, right?
Yeah, exactly. You always get these guys in high school strength. A lot of times you get guys in high school strength and conditioning programs, and they're the strength and conditioning coach because they either work out now or they worked out in the past.
Right.
So it's not like they're they're looking up what they should be doing, or doing some research and finding guys like you and
well, and it's not their main gig. You know, if you're an algebra teacher at a high school,
yes,
and you happen to be a football coach, and you just happen to be the football coach that also works out at the gym 3 days a week on his own, so you're the weightlifting guy, then, you know, lack of resources. So the high school says, hey, well, by default, you're the strength guy. They're not going to pay someone $60,000 a year to come in and run all the programs. So it's a convenient thing for them. The coach, algebra teacher / workout guy, feels vindicated, like, oh yeah, I'm the strength guy now. And they're probably excited. So what are they going to do? They're going to implement the workouts they like, or the workouts they remember doing back in the day. So the problem really comes down to, at least in that setting, high school, most organizations, even, you know, college, you know, D2 and D3 level especially, they don't allocate the resources or prioritize it, you know, when they should say, hey, you know, if we have these football players, who's going to have the most contact with them year round? It's going to be their strength coach. They're going to be responsible for developing them in the spring when our regular football coaches are not working with them. So maybe we should invest more resources into putting someone who's very qualified in this position. And since they won't do that, or they can't do that, it becomes the algebra teacher's job. And so now he has your son doing some bullshit instead of pushing sleds or carrying heavy stuff.
I squat, benching 3 days a week. And I went down to twice in the last year. I've been down to the Olentangy, two of the Olentangy high schools, who strength coaches brought in from Ohio State University. So I mean, the guys probably know their shit. God, these high schools are gorgeous.
I would say keyword probably.
Yeah.
You know.
But the high schools.
Oh, they look like colleges, right?
Oh my God, they're beautiful. So I mean, these schools obviously have money to hire, you know, professionals to come in and train them. You know, where, yeah, it's just with my son's high school. You know, I went in when he became a freshman because I've been in this business a long time and I know what happens. And I went in and I said, hey, I am volunteering. I don't have time to do this. I'm volunteering to come in and help you with your weightlifting program. Here's my resume, yada, yada, yada. No thanks, we're good.
Oh,
Christ.
That's so typical though, right?
Yeah.
And you're doing it, obviously, it's for selfish reasons. You want to help your son.
I told him, I
and
said,
you
when
want
my son graduates, I'm gone,
but there would be so much residual benefit to everyone else involved. And yet they don't recognize that.
And I don't want any money for it. Just let me come in and help. You know, and I don't even want to be the head guy. Just let me come in and help.
Well, and at that point too, it's not just about, hey, I want to make sure they're progressing and doing the right things. You want to make sure they're not doing the wrong things that are going to get them injured.
Right.
That the kids that are doing more advanced things have a good enough base, and you know that people are brought along, you know, at the proper pace. The problem is, even if you have someone in a position somewhere that maybe is a little bit progressive and is like looking stuff up online or whatever, you know, they might not have an understanding of, okay, well, this is not an appropriate movement for this kid who's 14 that doesn't have weight room experience. I got a text. This was probably a couple months ago, but it was from one of my high school wrestlers that's been with me for a long time. His dad sent me this video and said, hey, what do you think about this? And it was a video of, I'm not going to mention names, but it was a high school here in Columbus, who's, you know, fairly successful wrestling program, and they have, you know, one of their assistants or whatever's running their strength program. Their kids are all jacked up, but they had their guys doing, man, I even forget the name of the squat, but it's where you take the bar, the loaded from the floor on it and stand up. What is that called? Steinborn squat, I think is the name of it. And so they had these kids doing that with, like, you know, 185 or 225, and
discs are just flying.
Right, exactly. I mean, I said that is a very advanced, you know, strongman style squat that I would have, you know, mature athletes that are very experienced doing. I would not have high school kids do that because the risk for injury is great.
Why even at the highest level? You know, the one guy broke the world record at it last year. The guy who ended up winning World's Strongest Man, he broke the record doing that at the Arnold. But it's a trick lift. It's a trick lift. Yeah, what are you doing?
Right. But the problem is the guy probably saw the Instagram video of the guy at the Arnold doing 500 pounds or whatever it was. And he thought, you know, and so he had some strong kids, but he was very lucky that they got through that little Instagram video without, like you said, blowing a disc out. You know, so that's one of the other problems is there's people that aren't seeking out the information.
Yeah.
Then you have some people that are seeking out stuff and finding stuff, and maybe their heart's in the right place about it. They have the good intentions, but they don't understand, like, there's levels to this. There's certain things they should be doing, and that's something you build up to after years and years.
Yeah.
You don't have high school kids that have only been in the weight room for a month trying that, you know?
I went and talked to, I got asked to go out and speak to the National Guard in Cleveland. All these kids going into boot camp, and a lot of them weren't in shape, and they were real concerned. Hey, can you come out and, put them through a workout that, is going to be something like they would get in boot camp, and talk to them about training and nutrition and all this stuff. So I put them through this 15-minute workout. And all it was push-ups, air squats, and burpees. And it killed them. Killed most of them. And afterwards, though, I realized that it wasn't these kids necessarily being lazy. It was these kids having or not having the information. It was these kids having an overload of information and having no idea what to do with it, because they're on Instagram, they're watching Larry Wheels, bench press with 2 different bars, and it's.
Well, and look, and you took 3 very basic movements and crushed them.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be fancy.
No, but they had so many questions. I've never had a Q&A where I had more questions, and the questions were so above their pay grade as far as where they were as athletes, that I was just constantly bringing them back to the basics. You should be doing dips and pull-ups. What do you have to do in your test for the military? Oh, you have to do a deadlift. They're doing trap bar deadlift now. They're doing an overhead medicine ball. They're doing hanging knee raises and like a 1.5 mile run. I said, well, let's first see how you do with those, and then let's find some exercises to get you better.
Yeah, find what we have to do to train for those events.
But you definitely don't need to be talking to me about, what kind of, you be counting your macros and all this stuff, it's crazy. But,
yeah, it's that conversation right there reminds me of the time. This was a few years back, but I'm driving home from the gym. It's the middle of the summer, hot day, probably 9 degrees out, and I'm going, up Watkins Road towards my house. I'm in between these 2 cornfields, and from about a quarter mile away, I see this guy running. He got his shirt off or whatever. I'm getting close. I'm like, what's on this guy's head? And sure enough, he has one of those altitude masks on or whatever. And I get close to him, and I mean, no lie, he's probably jogging at like 4 miles per hour. And I want to roll down the window and say, take off the damn mask and just run harder.
Right, yeah.
Like what, like you're not going to, number one, those masks are so stupid.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Also too, like, you think you're getting this training benefit by restricting your oxygen. You could restrict your oxygen by creating a more of an oxygen debt by running hard, running fast. Like my kids can run faster than this guy's running.
Yeah.
So
one of my favorite scenes. Did you ever see the HBO show Generation Kill?
I have not. No.
So I got turned on to it by a buddy of mine who was a Marine Corps recon guy, and in the show, Rudy Reyes plays himself. I don't know if you know Rudy. Rudy's an actor and he's an ex-recon guy, but he plays himself, and he's a much younger version, and he is just jacked to the tits. I mean, and there's one scene where he's training because they're getting ready to roll on Baghdad. And there's one scene where he's training. Everyone else is out there doing push-ups with their shirt off and everything. He's in his full gas suit with the gas mask on, but he's running and like sprints full speed around this compound, And I guess that's how he was. But here's a guy who has the gas mask on. He's got the full suit on. He's just sprinting as fast as he can, just to make it harder because everything else is easy for him.
Well, and to that point, he may be in a situation where he's going to have to wear a gas mask and sprint.
Exactly.
So that's more
do it here
correct, and that's more of an acclimation thing, because if you never know what something feels like and then you have to do it under duress, it's not going to feel good.
Yeah.
It's already not going to feel good, but you may break. So that's obviously a way different situation.
Right. That's what I mean. You're not going to get gas masked here in the Columbus area.
No.
You don't really need that. We've had a couple people try to walk in with those things on their faces, and I always get rid of them. Get rid of that thing. I don't want that in here. Someone's going to pass it out and dying or something.
What people don't get too is like to get the training effect, the benefit that they think they're getting from that, like of training at altitude, you would have to wear it around the clock for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's just like whenever I have wrestlers that have to go out to the Olympic Training Center out in Colorado Springs, they say, if they're only there for a week, it's terrible because they never get acclimated to the altitude. So it's almost like they don't even get the benefit of it because your body just does not adapt immediately. So when you wear that mask in training, all you're doing is temporarily restricting your oxygen, making your workout much less efficient. So you're probably not going to be able to train as hard. And so there's no lasting carryover as far as like making you adapt to not needing as much oxygen unless you kept it on and just wore it around the clock.
Yeah.
So
we bashed the speed ladder.
Who else? Who else is next?
Yeah, you used to. I don't know if they even do it anymore. They used to have a lot of UFC fights out in Colorado, and those guys would all have to go up there like a month early to get their training camp.
For sure.
And now they're saying you should probably sleep at altitude and train below altitude is now the new thing they're talking about.
There's always something new, right?
Yeah, like a what do they call it? The deprivation tanks or whatever, the oxygen deprivation.
Those tents or whatever they sleep in. Yeah.
Yeah, we never had that shit when I was growing up. I had foam rollers.
What's that?
We didn't have foam rollers growing up, let alone
No.
tents. Yeah, I am. If you go out to my car right now, in the back seat, there is 7 kettlebells that I snagged from a guy on the way down here. I'm getting so into that, but the reason.
So this was a guy that bought someone just getting rid of them type of thing?
Yeah, he had them in his house. I stopped on the way down and grabbed them all from him. That's how I ended up getting stopped by the train. It was like right by his house when I pulled out. But I'm getting so into making my training and the training for my people more and more basic. Because as a young strength coach, when kids would come in, I was all excited about, we're going to put them through the latest conjugate method thing with the bands.
You want to show them how smart you are.
Right. And now it's like, man, I've got all these Atlas stones and I've got all these kettlebells and some tires and pull-up bars and dip bars, and I can get everybody in shape with that, And that's why one of the reasons I love coming here is because this gym has everything you need to make athletes awesome.
Yeah, I think if it's not here, I don't think you really need it. I can really say we have everything. From a weightlifting standpoint, we have all the basic free weights. There's nothing free weight wise that we do not have. And then we have the other implements. We have medicine balls, we have sleds, we have a yoke, we have farmer's handles. And from a conditioning standpoint, we have assault bikes, we have a Jacob's ladder, we got treadmills. I'm not a huge fan of running on treadmills, but in the wintertime it's
better than nothing.
Yeah, it's better than nothing. Luckily we have a track right down the street that we can go to when it's nice out. But yeah, you don't really need anything super fancy.
No, I just sold a bunch of equipment this week that we just don't use, and there's no me putting it in the program in the future. So
if you had to pick one piece of equipment that is like quote unquote like mainstream or basic that you think is a staple, what is it?
To be honest with you, wow, geez, that's tough. But the pull-up bar, the dip bar would be right up there, maybe with a squat rack next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking maybe even more like kind of like let me rephrase that, like a kind of stereotypical gym equipment. So outside, I agree, pull up and dip bars, like it's not a gym if you don't have that. Yeah. Same thing with a squat rack. But what is something that maybe your listeners, knowing what type of training you do, that they might not expect you to like? What do you like? Like for me, we have a chest supported T-bar row.
So I was going to say either a row or some kind of heavy duty lat pull down, and the reason for that is it's going to give you. First of all, my favorite Louis line is strong people have strong backs,
mm-hmm.
And that's what I was going to say. Some kind of row or even more so than a lat pull down would be some kind of heavy row.
I love having a lat cable too.
Yeah.
So I know it's kind of bodybuilder-ish, but
got one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's building that back is just so important for everything.
So any speed coaches right now that are listening to this and are pissed off, you can start bashing us for our lat pull down machines that we love.
I guarantee that if you took a set of twins and put one of them in this gym and one of them in, I'm guaranteeing there's got to be 50 of those speed strength places within 100 miles of this place.
Right.
Everything else being the same, I guarantee the genetically same child that's in this gym will end up getting faster. Because there's only really one way to get faster, and that's to put more force against the ground.
Right.
And it doesn't come from speed ladders.
No. I've never. I was a terrible runner growing up. I hated it and I wasn't good at it. I'm now. I'm going to be 41 here in a few months. I'm faster than I've ever been.
Yeah.
I can run harder than I ever have, and it's. I don't do. I don't back squat. I don't do anything too crazy for my legs. I lunge heavy. I do tons of hamstring work. I push heavy sleds, and when I run really hard.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Yeah.
So I think. There doesn't have to be anything too crazy to your strength program. There has to be some type of squat movement. There has to be a hinge movement. You need to do accessory work to really shore up those hamstrings and those glutes. And I think you gotta push heavy things. You gotta drag heavy things, and you gotta run fast.
Yeah, all basic, primitive.
So basic, right?
Easy stuff, When I was setting myself up to help out with the strength program at my son's school, actually my wife asked me first, but I had this discussion with a few people, but she asked me, what would you do with them? And now, this is coming from a team that's only won 2 games in the last 3 years, so they need a lot of work. And I said, I think I would take it back to the absolute basics, and I think we would start off with a month or so of boot camp style calisthenics and learning how to properly air squat and do push-ups and pull-ups and running. I believe all kids should be able to run a mile, not jog it, run a mile. And once they've got to that, we would maybe spend some time doing like heavy tire flips because it's going to hit everything. And I think I would just keep it as basic as possible. I think it'd be a lot of fun to take a team and have them do heavy tire flips and calisthenics and sprints and hill runs and stadium steps and farmers walks and stuff. And I guarantee the results you would get are going to be a lot better than that school two cities over who's doing their quarter squats and bench presses.
Yeah, they're bigger, faster, stronger program or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Now, to play devil's advocate here, there would be a lot of strength gurus that would listen to this and say, well, you should never have football players run a mile because that doesn't train. I've seen a lot of chatter on Twitter about this, saying, well, a football player should never run, a 110 because the play is only 6 seconds or whatever. I believe that you have to build a base capacity. So if you're only doing 6-second sprints because that's all the longer a football play lasts, but you don't have that capacity to shore that up, the recovery is not going to be the same. And I just think you have to be well-rounded as an athlete. You can't just train super specific for whatever the sport is.
Right. Why does Louis have his powerlifters pulling sleds?
Right.
Why do the UFC guys only not just train in 5-minute bursts? Why do they do things in 6-second bursts? Or why do they run for miles at a time? Why not just train 3-5-minute rounds? And go as hard as you can.
Yeah, I think the term sport specific has almost been kind of twisted and perverted to where people think it has to be so specific for the sport. I had some guy the other day that was here and he was like, "Oh, I love watching your stuff. All your stuff is so sport specific for wrestling." I'm like, "What?" And I said, "Well, yes and no." I said, "You got to understand, much of the stuff we do is very general."
Yeah.
I said, "But you might be thinking about the one row variation I have them doing where they're bent over and they're holding a band and squeezing on one side and rowing the other side." I said, "But that doesn't mean that every position we try to do mimics a wrestling position,
or that even all your kids are doing that movement."
Correct. That might just be the icing on the cake for the guys that are advanced. We start out, if we're doing rows, it's a very basic dumbbell row and it's very heavy. So this other stuff, so to me, sport specific, means what specific skill set do we need to be, to be successful in that sport. So if you look at wrestling, we got to have a strong grip. We have to be able to, pull. We got to be able to have a strong posterior chain, stay down the stance, good leg drive. But when you're hand fighting, there's a pushing element to that. You're pulling and pushing, right? When you're in high school, when you're down in your base, in referee's position, and someone's trying to break you down, there's an element of pushing against the ground so that you don't get broken down. So In that way, couldn't we say bench press is sport specific? So there's much more to sport specific than what meets the eye. And I've heard it, especially being in the wrestling world. Coaches will say, come on videos I have and stuff, and they'll say, "Oh, wrestlers shouldn't bench press. If you're on your back, pressing, then it's too late. That means you're getting pinned." I'm like, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense to someone who's an idiot that doesn't know anything. And I'm sure when I was 15 and I heard that for the first time, it sounded like a cool idea too.
I hear wrestling coaches saying that.
Absolutely, and they believe it, but you have to be well-rounded from a strength standpoint. You know that. We can't say, okay, since wrestling is primarily pulling, we can't only do pulling movements, because then there's going to be a weak link in the chain. So what I say is, okay, we still have to do presses every week, but we're going to prioritize pulling. So we do pulling to pushing, a 2-to-1 ratio. If you looked at the volume for the week, whether it's our reps and sets, we're doing twice as much pulling movements as we are pushing. But that doesn't mean that my guys don't do heavy pushing movements year round.
It's also the 2-to-1 ratio is so important for shoulder health.
Absolutely.
When I look at your programming, from what I can see online, I wouldn't have any problem taking your quote-unquote wrestling sports-specific training and throwing it into my son's football program, because, look, we're not dealing with Baker Mayfield here. We're dealing with kids who need to get better and stronger in every aspect of their training.
Oh, I get messages from parents all the time that will say, "I've been thinking about buying one of your programs, but my son's a high school football player. He doesn't wrestle. Could he use the wrestling program?" I say, yes, absolutely. Like, if you want to take out maybe some of the grip-specific accessories, because their grip is not going to be as important when they're a linebacker, then you can do that, and maybe add some more things for lateral movement or whatever. But strength is strength, and speed is speed, and I think that it's going to carry over for any athlete. So some of the stuff that wrestlers need is prioritized, but that doesn't mean that we only benefit wrestlers.
Yeah, especially and the grip stuff. I think everyone needs too. I have a gripper right next to my chair at home. And I hit that a couple times every day. Just playing with it, and it's a good indicator of how strong you are. And these kids that a lot of times will come into my gym, that's the first thing I look at. The kid gives me a nice, hard, firm handshake. I'm like, all right, this kid's done something in his life.
Right.
As opposed to that weak one, but a lot of times that's man camp, where I tell my wife I've got man camp here. It's just showing 13-year-old boys how to be men.
Well, I think it's kind of and I hate to sound like an old man here, but it's kind of a generational thing too. Kids now have grown up with phones, and that's how they interact.
Yeah.
So now the idea of introducing themselves and shaking a hand and looking someone in the eye and say, "Hi, my name's Dustin Myers. It's nice to meet you." They've never had to do that before.
Yeah.
So when I start working with young athletes, and even just last week or 2 weeks ago when I had my son and his little drill partners come in, that was the first thing I did is I taught them how to shake hands, because let's say like, "Hi, I'm Jack," and they look down. They don't have that. I don't even want to say it's a confidence thing. It's not so much a reflection of their confidence in themselves, but maybe confidence in that type of interaction, because they're not used to it. Does that make sense?
No. We had this conversation in the gym the other day in a different setting, and I said I feel so sorry for boys these days, because when we were kids, if we saw a cute girl, we had to figure out how to get across that room. We had to figure out something to say to her, and you had 10 seconds to make that impression and get her giggling or get her impressed, so you had to be so quick and light on your feet in order to spit game at these girls. Where these kids now, my son's going to a dance with a girl that he's met once, and he's had text message with her back and forth. And it's
don't kid yourself. They've probably been Snapchatting each other too.
Well, that's true. But it was so much harder for us because we had to be able to have some game, or you were never going to get laid.
Right. Well, and I see this conversation taking a turn here, but me and one of my buddies were talking about this earlier. We're like, there was such a mystery to women, when we were growing up. I said, but now the big mystery was you had to wait until you actually got them naked to see what they looked like naked.
Right.
Now And again, I'm not hating on whatever the fashion is now or whatever, but yoga pants have changed that.
It's an advertisement.
It's an advertisement. Yeah, you're already seeing what they're working with. So young guys now, like I don't know if there's the same mystery to it that there was before. Before when we were at least when we were young.
But it's right, we didn't have yoga pants, did we?
No, girls used to wear baggy sweatpants.
Baggy sweatpants,
which
right.
still looked nice.
For
you
sure.
you could still see if a girl had a nice ass or whatever, but there was definitely more of a mystery to like what their body was going to look like, which to me was the biggest excitement of the whole thing.
Yeah, right. It's a whole different world. Like when we were coming up, the thought of it wasn't called internet dating, but it was like computer dating, I think they called it. They were such losers. Oh, you're gonna computer date?
You're calling the sex hotline,
right? And now that's just the way things work. Everyone's on. I get for some reason I get black singles. I get emails from them all the time. I'm like,
they must be looking at your browsing history.
Black or single, but I get emails from them all the time. But you can get on these sites, and this is how people are meeting. It's crazy.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. I had one of my good buddies, recently went through a divorce, and we hung out, over the summer, and he was like telling me, now he's been out of the game for so long, he's in his 40s, he's trying to venture back in the dating world, and let me tell you what, it sounds terrifying. He's showing me his Tinder profile, and he's like, I don't know whether these girls are real or whether it's like a fake account or whether they're here. I was like, well, what are you supposed to do? He's like, well, you swipe and then they see if you swiped. And I'm like, oh, like, shoot me. Like, I would not want to be in this situation,
And I thought about that. You're in line at Starbucks and I'm thinking, okay, what if my wife left me tomorrow? What would I do? I don't even know how to meet a girl anymore. It's like, what?
Well, and then imagine having to like go to your phone and do that.
Oh,
yeah,
horrible.
So any of you old guys out there that are, out there on the market and trying your best, I feel for you because I'm sure it's a way different world than the 90s.
Yeah, and the other thing is you look at these girls and they all look like they're junior high school girls. They might be in their 20s, but they all look so young. You're like,
I think that's part of just getting to a certain age. I always say now any girl that's between 15 and 25, I can't tell how old they are. Like if you're a girl that works at the coffee shop, you might be 15, you might be 25. I don't know. Yep. But that's why I just pretend like, I'm married anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I just pretend I'm invisible to women now,
Right.
So
trust me, we are invisible to women right now. There's no doubt about it. We are both in the best shape of our lives, and we're both completely invisible. Speaking of that, you are on some kind of, what is it, 150 days of getting just ripped?
Actually, much shorter than that. It's 28 days.
Okay.
Yeah, so I wrote this ebook 3 or 4 years ago called Shredded in 28 Days. It was actually one of my first ebooks I came out with, and it's been one of the most popular. Actually, I ran the numbers in January, and just in 2019 alone, over 20 different countries, people from 20 different countries bought this ebook. Yeah. So people have been using it all over the world. And the reason I made it, I was like, you know what? I was like, well, let me back up. I'm going to say, I'm generally in great shape year round. I still train hard. I do lift twice, lift or run or whatever, do some combination twice a day year round, and eat very good. But usually in the fall, I kind of let my diet go. And even though my training doesn't really change that much, I might put on 10 to 20 pounds in the fall time, and I lose that six pack.
What's the reasoning behind it? Just give yourself a break?
Yeah, just mentally to kind of give myself a break, enjoy the holidays. I used to try to eat clean during the holidays. I said, you know what? If I want to eat ice cream every day with my kids over the holidays, I'm just going to do it, If I want to wake up and have donuts for breakfast with them, I'm going to let myself do that. So rather than always trying to be pretty regimented. But so anyway, so I was like, you know what? I don't like getting in shape to be, or getting back to my baseline to be a 4-month process. I'm going to put together this training plan in this nutrition strategy based off how I normally eat, but make it very intensive and see how much ground can I make up in 1 month. Yeah. And that was I put together that program. And so now, like I said, it's done very well. I use it every January to kind of get back to what is my good baseline, which is in the low 160s. Last year I kind of let my weight get out of control. I was up about, in the low to mid 180s, and I lost, close to 20 pounds in 1 month.
Yeah.
And, this year I didn't start quite so heavy. I was at 175 2 weeks ago. Now I'm back in the, 166, 167. And I'll probably be back right around 160, in top shape in 1 month.
And for guys like us, you feel that. I mean, there's a difference. I know now that I've lost a ton of weight that I know what feels good and what doesn't. And 5 pounds will make a difference. You know the feeling. You're just not in fighting shape.
Right. And I definitely feel a little bit more strong, more stronger. It sounds weird. I have, I think, more brute strength when I'm heavier. I can, tote around heavier weight. I don't feel quite as fragile, I should say, but I feel it more when I'm doing my long runs. Yeah. That extra, 10 or 15 pounds on my joints. My muscle ups suck right now. The different, body weight movements that I love, things like that. So I definitely feel a lot better in that 160 to 165 range.
Yeah, that's what it's about. We're not training for the Olympics at this point in our lives. We're trying to feel as healthy and as strong and as fast as possible, right?
Absolutely.
And it look good in the process.
Right. To the invisible, or the
to us.
Yeah, to us. Exactly. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Well, I like to think. I mean, I'm sure our wives still appreciate too, right?
Yeah, I mean, my wife doesn't say anything to me. She's horrible. No, but yeah, it's such a misnomer that you can't be in shape in your 40s. I talk to guys all the time that are my age. I'll see them in Target or something, and honestly, it sounds like they've got one foot in the grave. Like,
right.
I can't do anything anymore. And it's sad because you should have another 30 years left in your life, and you're giving up.
Well, they've given up, and that's exactly what it is. I mean, we could go on eBay right now, and we could find, let's say, a 1968 Stingray.
Yeah.
And you could find one with maybe high miles, but it's in mint condition, probably still drives like a mother, could go take it to the track today. And then you could find another one that's been beat up, that's not running, that has a ton of mileage on it, and it's just scratched to hell and looks like shit, and probably should just be in the junkyard.
Yeah.
So it's all about what has the owner done to preserve it. I'm sure you have a ton of mileage on your body right now.
Yeah.
I have a ton of mileage on mine. We're high mileage vehicles at this point. But that doesn't mean the condition has to be bad. That doesn't mean the performance has to be bad. Now, at some point, there's going to be a decline. Am I still going to be able to run a sub 60-second 400 meters when I'm 50? I don't know. Yeah. Probably not. At some point, I'm going to start getting slower. But it's not going to happen because I sat on the couch.
Yeah.
And I think that has to be kind of the mindset, we as men have as we get older. Like, there's going to be an eventual decline. I mean, that's life. Everyone, you don't beat the clock forever, but you don't have to give up and just say, all right, the game's over now. Yeah. And that's what happens with most people. They give up on themselves. And whether it's because they get to a certain age and life gets in the way, or, sports is not a part of their life anymore. But that's why, again, going back to my kids, both my kids, their first sport, quote unquote sport, is working out.
Yeah.
It's training. So hopefully when it's all said and done, whatever my daughter ends up doing in school, whatever my son ends up doing, and if they do it for a long time, great. If not, oh well. I think they're always going to have that base of exercising and training because of the culture we've built in our house, so that when someday they're sitting here, in our shoes at this age, they're still going to, approach their life the same way I do. Is that, it's a part of what you do. It should be a part of who you are, and that is what's going to really preserve your quality of life for the long haul.
Yeah, you set them up for health for their entire life.
Exactly.
The people that I look at now that are super inspiring, believe it or not, are the old pro wrestlers. Like, you look at Hulk Hogan, or Rocky Johnson just died yesterday, The Rock's dad, or Kevin Nash. These guys are still in really good shape, and they're in their 60s, But they're public figures, and they go to these comic shows. No one wants to see a deteriorated hero from when they were 12,
right.
And it just kind of proves that you can, I remember the old pictures of Bruno Sammartino in his 80s, and he was still jacked, hanging out at the pool, and you can definitely do it, man, but it takes a lot of hard work.
What a crazy culture they came up in back in the day, though, in the old pro wrestling days.
Old books. I'm dying. I would love to get Road Warrior Animal on the show. I've sent him a couple messages. He was my hero growing up with the Road Warrior.
Oh yeah.
I'd love to get him on the show. Just talk about. I don't even care about the old, the shit that happened. I want to know how you trained, what you did.
Right. Have you ever watched the Ric Flair documentary?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That thing was
And
awesome.
I was doing great. I mean, I know he's got some major health problems now, but I mean, I think came up on my memories from maybe 3 years ago where he was deadlifting 315 in the gym, you know, and he was
Right.
well into his 60s.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Still out there. Hulk Hogan looks great. He's walking up and down Clearwater Beach. But yeah, you can still do it, and you know the kind of training you do here and that we do at my place is, you know, I'd love to get what we do. We have a lot of 40-plus-year-old guys in there. The more the merrier, man, because those are my people, you know.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. My dad is 65. He still works out every day.
Yeah.
He still has his gym out in the garage. You know, his old unheated, unattached, unheated garage. Got the heavy bag out there. You know, so he does some weights. He rides the Airdyne. He hits the heavy bag. He don't lift heavy anymore. You know, he'll still even go for a run. Now he runs about as slow as the guy that was wearing the oxygen mask.
But he's going a lot harder.
Yeah, he does something every day. You know, I mean, until he got into a pretty bad motorcycle wreck in his early 50s, and that was kind of the end of heavy lifting after that.
Yeah.
But even up until that point, I mean, he was still using 100-pound dumbbells on chest presses and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, and then even on the other side of the family, my mom, she's still, she's 66. She still goes hiking every day, does yoga. You know, she lives way out in the country. You know, the house I grew up in, she still lives in. It's 80 or 85 acres, and it's this huge valley. And, you know, every day she goes, even in the wintertime, she goes out, she goes for a hike, comes back, does some meditation, does some yoga. So, you know, that was the culture I grew up in, even though it was very unintentional on their part. They never had any,
They weren't indoctrinating.
No, they were not. Not like me, you know, indoctrinating, brainwashing, however you want to say, however you want to say it. But I think that was just the way they were and the type of people they are, and you know, that's the effect it's had on me, and hopefully that'll kind of continue for generations.
Yeah, fit for life, you know, healthy for life. That's one of the things I try to stress when people come in now is health, strength, and then appearance. You know, and that's hard to do because everyone just wants to come in and, you know, have abs right away.
Right.
You know.
Well, I always think that, you know, having abs should be the byproduct of your training, not the purpose of your training.
Well, you look at the wrestlers. You know, these wrestlers take down their singlets. You're like, holy shit. None of them are going to the gym to get nice abs.
Right.
You know, they're just a byproduct of the intense training they've done.
The intense training, you know, the dietary habits.
Yeah.
You know, probably, you know, obviously a lot of them are probably cutting weight, so that probably doesn't hurt either.
Sure.
But maintaining it. You know, if you want abs, you know, have a low body fat and a strong core. You know, you don't want to. You shouldn't just think, all right, what's the magic crunch I need to do to get abs? Yeah. There is no magic crunches to get abs.
Yeah, we can't whittle through that 4 inches of fat you have on your belly to get to your abs.
Right.
You know, my dad's abs look exactly the same as mine, but you know, they just got to get rid of all that tissue in front of it first. You know, people they want to do sit-ups. They want to do the, you know, why aren't we doing more ab training? But you just did a ton of ab training. You just don't know it.
Yeah, that barbell that you carried overhead across the room, that's ab training.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm not going to take up any more of your time. Anything else you want to promote or throw out there or push?
That's really it, man. I mean, I just think, you know, any of you guys that were listening that, you know, found me interesting or want to, you know, talk shit to me about my lack of speed training love, you know, make sure you check out my Instagram at Coach Myers _gut-check. You know, I put tons of content on there, you know, a lot of wrestling specific stuff, but stuff just for athletes in general. So you'll always find good, you know, interesting content, good motivational stuff. You know, check me out on there. So at Coach Myers _gut-check. I also have a, you know, kind of a coaching page on Facebook too. I think it's just Coach Myers on Facebook. So
and Join a Real Gym at Join a Real Gym, is that what it is?
Yeah. So the gym is at Join a Real Gym. That's a pretty catchy name,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So that's the old school gym handle at Join a Real Gym. And then I have ebook plans and programs that are available at oldschoolgym.com.
Yeah, and good stuff too, man. It's all stuff that if you're not working out at Old School Gym or a Blind Dog Gym, you can do this shit in your garage or your basement, you know, with pretty limited equipment and get everything you need, 100%. So.
Awesome, man. Well, I always appreciate the conversation. Always a good time when you come down, man.
I love coming down here, and you know we're going to do it again. So, all right, this has been the Refined Savage. See ya.